One more case study here before the break from Kohler. We're going to learn about the use of electronic work instruction in an international Greenfield plant for process training. And we have a senior project engineer with us today, Arafat Mahabub.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Arafat Mahabub. I'm a senior project engineer with Kohler Company. Just a little bit about Kohler, as what we do is we are mostly in the plumbing industry. So we manufacture toilet bowls, toilet tanks. We also do kitchen and bath products like faucets. We are also in the energy manufacturing side as well, making generators, engines for lawnmowers and things like that. But specifically for my division, which is the vitreous, plastics, and electronics, I deal mostly with the manufacturing of toilet bowls and looking at the manufacturing of acrylic bathtubs. So my project in this case will be just revolving around that manufacturing process. So before we really dig deep into the presentation, I just want to go through with the agenda real quick. So the first thing I do want to let you know about the facility information, like as to where exactly that we did this trial with the electronic and digital work instructions. Then I'm gonna follow by with the smart glass technology that we use for this trial and what we're using it for the electronic work instructions. Then I'm gonna discuss a little bit about the integration steps, what exactly from the very beginning, from the very end, what are the steps that we had to take to make this a successful trial for us. Then, of course, I'm going to share a little bit about the electronic work instructions that we developed and we've implemented. Then some feedback from the operators, positive, negative, what are their feedbacks using the technology, the hardware, the interactiveness with the software as well. Then some of the challenges that we face, and of course, projects are not exactly fun when you don't have any challenges, right? So it's very mundane. So I'm going to discuss about what are some of the problems we face, some of the hurdles we face, and how do we overcome those. Then, of course, the next steps for us are evolving this electronic work instruction into something else in the future. So a little bit about the facility information. So we have in my the presentation title, we said International Greenfield, right? So Greenfield meaning is a brand new plant from the ground to the top. So we had to build a plant. We did all the construction for it, install all the equipment, and commission all the equipment, and we started production. So that's what Greenfield is. And international, as in it's located in the central Mexico. So honestly speaking, it's middle of nowhere. We do have plants in Mexico, but it's northern part of Mexico. In the central part, this is our first time actually building a plant over there. So it's a brand new area for us, and we're basically trying to figure out how we want to go about with all these new hires that's happening. And we're going to be focusing on the vitreous plumbing industry for this plant, so manufacturing of toilet tanks and toilet bowls. Like faucets and things like that will not be manufactured in this plant. Then, of course, it being in the Mexico plant, it's a majority of a Spanish-speaking plant, so we need to keep that in mind while we are actually developing the electronic work instructions. And like I said, it's a new plant, so there's going to be a lot of new hires. Some are even not familiar with our manufacturing process, like making toilet bowls. They're very new to it, so we need to also keep that in mind when developing the electronic work instructions. And we just in the summer started production in this plant, and we're trying to ramp it up. And actually, we're not completely done with installing and commissioning equipment. It's still ongoing. In fact, I have to actually fly out to Mexico tomorrow morning just to oversee some of the installation of equipment. So we're still in the process of ramping it up. It's not at its full capacity yet. It's going to be in a few years' time. So the technology that we use for electronic work instruction. So this is a smart glass that we use. It's not just keep in mind it's not mixed reality or it's not augmented reality. It's a smart glass where we use Vuzix and RealWear technology hardware. So you basically have a display in it right in front of your eyes. You can test it out upstairs with some of the vendors, but it's a smart glass, right, with a display unit right in front. So we use Vuzix M400 and RealWear Navigator 500. So these are slightly different from each other in terms of the user friendliness, the usability, the weight of the hardware itself. So we wanted to test both of them out and see which one the operator prefers better. Then the developer that we use, we worked with TeamViewer as the person and the entity developing these electronic work instructions for us. Then TeamViewer has an app called Frontline. So this is the app on the smart glass itself, and it's also web-based, where if you want to develop the electronic work instruction, you actually go to their website, you log in, then you do all the development in that web-based software, Frontline app. Then the integration steps that we took. The very first integration step is, well, we got to identify if there is an opportunity, right? We just don't want to use smart glass for the sake of using it. Just because it's cool doesn't mean that it will gain benefits out of it. So we need to understand if there is an opportunity. So of course, it being a new plant, brand new plant, middle of nowhere, we're going to have a lot of new hires. They're going to have to be trained on the process. And this is an opportunity. We saw that using an interactive way of learning might be something that can be beneficial to us and the operators as well. So the second step is we now identified the plant. We identified the process. There's, making a toilet, for example, there's so many different processes that takes place. So we identified a process that has so many delicate steps that are sometimes hard to remember unless you're a seasoned, experienced person. So we identified casting process as where we will see some benefits, right? So what we did was we had to gather experts in that process, and what they had to do was, take the standard operating procedure that we have in place and see if we can digitize it. Then at the same time, take some pictures and videos that are relevant to this process, and that can be meaningful for the operators when we actually develop the electronic work instructions. So gathering would have been the next step that we did. And the third step is basically we took all those contents and we contacted TeamViewer and we said, hey, the first electronic work instructions, we want to work with you, we want to partner with you, and you give us a template and basically a standard template that we can work with that will be very interactive and would be user-friendly for our operators. So TeamViewer helped us develop that first electronic work instructions. Then going forward, recently we developed another work instructions, and we actually involved our internal team. We collaborated with our internal team to create that. So going forward, we want to own this process of creating electronic work instructions, and this is where we're trying to collaborate with our internal team for this. Then the other step would be obviously train the operators. They got to understand how to use the hardware, like voice activation, using the touchpad. They need to be more familiar with the process itself. And with the smart glass that I discussed, you also have a little small test where you kind of understand what's your dominant eye, right? So we kind of got the operators more familiar with the process and the hardware itself, so they feel more comfortable using it, because after all, they are our end users, right? Then we did the trial. We try to understand and validate the electronic work instruction is valuable to them. We got their feedback, and we want to make improvements based on their feedback. So those were the steps that we took in integrating this electronic work instruction. So this smart glass, first of all, we did train a few casters or our operators. So we kind of identified the operators in terms of we wanted to see a very experienced seasoned operator and inexperienced operator and try to compare how they fare when using this technology. So your picture on your left is just a very simple test to understand what's your dominant eye. And this can play a really important role when you're actually using those display right at the smart glass. And on the right-hand side is just one of our casters trying to get more familiar with using this technology. And they're actually out there on the production floor trying to understand if their voice recognition and the volume of the hardware is sufficient for them when they're going through this process. So the electronic work instruction, the first step is you take the standard operating procedure that we have. So on your left-hand side, this Kohler typical template of standard operating procedure. This is usually printed and distributed on the production floor. So you have a bunch of steps, you have instructions for those steps, and you have key points in red. Then you have pictures that kind of reference those steps, right? So that's basically the typical SOP that we use, the standard operating procedure. Then what we wanted to do is we wanted to digitize it, right? So on your right-hand side, this is basically a snapshot of from TeamViewer's Frontline app. So we took a snapshot just to give you an idea of how you develop an electronic work instruction. So it's basically pick and drop sort of programming, so you don't need to really know any algorithm. All you do is pick a template. If it's a video, if it's pictures, if it's text you want to use, there's different templates that you can use. You pick and drop, then you basically drag arrows to see the flow of your the pages in your the smart glass. So that's basically what that is. Just that is where you make all those changes and actually create an electronic work instruction. Then, just to give you some more idea of how we got about this page that you see here, this snapshot, that's the main menu of the electronic work instruction. So what we're trying to do here is we have a main menu, and the operator can select either by touchpad, by clicking onto those buttons that you see, A, B, C, D, E, or they can actually speak to it. They can voice activate and say, selección, ponchado, and it will go right to the B. And since I mentioned before that this is being deployed and has been deployed in our Mexico plant, so we made it in the Spanish version, because a lot of our production floor operators speak Spanish, very little speak English, so we wanted to make sure it's valuable to them. And the reason why we created a template in this way is sometimes when you're a seasoned operator, you don't want to go through the entire process, right? Entire step. You just probably want to just look at step D, something for you to remember how to do that step. So instead of going one page at a time, you just go to the main menu and you just go to D. And if you are in D, step D, because we group the steps so that it keeps it more simple when you're calling it out. And if you want to go to step B, instead of keep on going previous, keep on saying previous, you just go to the main menu and you say ponchado, and it goes to step B. So we just wanted to create a very user-friendly menu to start this electronic work instructions. And now I have two templates just to give you an idea of the one on the left-hand side. As you can see, this is the actual snapshot of what the operator will see on that display unit. On the left-hand side, you see on the buttons, you have menu, video, and siguiente in Spanish, meaning next, right? So you see text instructions, and on your right-hand side, it's referencing a picture, and you have basically any highlighted circles or points that you want to point out, like a button that you need to press, for example. The other thing is the template on your right-hand side is the same thing, but you have extra buttons where you have what we call the materials, the tools that is relevant for that process. So what tools do you want to use? So we want to give that opportunity for the operator. If they want to know what tools to use, they just say materials, and it will just pop up to a next page showing you a picture of the tools that you should be using for that step. And of course, we highlight key points in red. So I wanted to actually play a video over here, but whatever I embedded before, it's just kept crashing my presentation, so I just skipped that process. But as you can see on the left template, it's a video that you can program it to play it in loop if you want. And while the video is being played, what happens is that there's a narration in the background. So not only you're watching the video on how to do that step, but you're also hearing the instruction on how to do that step. And that instruction also goes into loop. So it's a very interactive way of a person learning on how to go about doing that step instead of just reading instructions in front of you. The one on the right-hand side, that's just an example of the material-less, the tool template that we used, just giving the reference of what tool to use for that operator. And one thing we learned while creating this is, for example, when you have a bunch of different buttons that you want to speak out to, like you want to say text, but the thing is, text is one syllable. You want to be able to create buttons that will have two syllables, so it's more easier for that hardware to recognize. So in this case, instead of text, it's texto, right? So you have two syllables, and the hardware picks up much more easily. If it's just one syllable, then it's harder for the hardware to pick up that syllable. So we kind of learned that in the process as well, is when you're designing an electronic work instruction, if you want to have the hardware recognize your voice to activate, navigate through the process, try to use two syllables as buttons. And this is an example of how we got about creating those snapshots that you saw earlier. So what we do is, it's very simple. We have PowerPoint presentation file. We create this on a PowerPoint slide. And we have pictures, text. We put all those on a PowerPoint slide. Then we take a snapshot of that, and that snapshot becomes the image that we're going to import it into that Frontline TeamViewer app. And that becomes the part of the electronic work instruction. Same thing with this, just a black background. We blacked out in the PowerPoint slide, background, pictures, text. Take a snapshot of this and import that into the TeamViewer's Frontline app as a work instruction. Some of the operators' feedback that we received throughout this whole trial and process, they like the fact that it shows them a step-by-step on how to do the work, the process, and it's interactive. There's videos, there's pictures, so they're not just looking at a paper and trying to figure things out. It's easier for them when they see actually videos and narration of what's going on. So they like that fact. And the other thing is they like the fact that they don't have to go, if they need help with the process, they take the smart glass and they put it on and go to the step and learn the process. They don't have to wait for someone to come in or call someone to help them out with relearning the process. It's out there for them, easily accessible. Then they found the hardware that we used. The audio volume was sufficient, easy to navigate. So they like the hardware so far. And of course, they're recommending it can be used for other operators as well. There are some negative feedback as well that we received. For example, sometimes the hardware, it feels like it's falling off, right? So we needed to understand different way of attachment for those smart glasses. So we did receive some constructive feedback from them, and we wanted to make sure that we are finding the right hardware for them to use, more comfortable for them to use. And of course, the challenges that we faced. First of all, getting buy-ins from the stakeholders. It's with a technology that's still fairly new in some of these industries, trying to get them on board with using this sort of technology, it can be difficult, right? So it has to be from management to the operators to the supervisors. Everyone needs to know that this technology works. This technology will benefit. It's not just for the sake of using it. And it's also compliant with safety policies, IT policies, and so on and so forth. Like some of the feedback that we used, can we use this in the production floor? Is it going to hinder you when there's a forklift coming, right? Is it hazardous in that way? So those were the questions that came about when we're trying to show it to all the other stakeholders and try to gain their alignment with this sort of technology. The other one is IT, cybersecurity, legal. So we had to go through a lot of hurdles when it comes to, let's say, IT. They wanted to make sure that the single sign-on feature works, multi-factor authentication works. They wanted to install certificates, specific certificates, so they can connect to our company network. It has to be configured for a SOTI mobile control. So there's a whole bunch of things that IT has to do, and cybersecurity actually had to do a bunch of penetration tests, vulnerability tests, and they had to talk with, let's say, the vendor, TeamViewer in this case, to make sure that all those are complying with our policies. And there's other issues when it comes to legal. Since the smart glass has capability of capturing pictures and videos, does this violate any of the labor laws in some of the countries, some of the areas? And at the same time, are we storing personal identifiable information in the system or not? Because that might breach data privacy policies as well. So we had to go through several different departments in making sure that we can actually use this sort of technology on the production floor. Then Wi-Fi connectivity is another challenge that we face. This challenge is more specific to remote assistance, because you need continuous data network to communicate. However, for electronic work instruction, it's not too critical, because once you have an updated electronic work instruction downloaded into your smart glass, it's good. Unless you update your electronic work instruction, then you need to make sure you have Wi-Fi connections, may it be on the production floor or your office, to update that electronic work instruction and also update the software version. So that's only when you need the Wi-Fi connectivity. Otherwise, it's not all that critical for the electronic work instruction. Then, of course, the comfort level for the operators. After all, they are the end users. If they're not comfortable, then it's going to be really hard to scale it up. Some of the next steps, we want to keep using this technology on the production floor. We've been doing trials lately, but we want to really be more comfortable using this so we can scale it up. Then we want to be able to create electronic work instruction for more complex process. So that will be our next step. So we kind of got the easier steps done. Now we want to do for more complex process. Then, of course, we want to explore more of the augmented reality side of things, having exploded view, 3D images. We want to be able to train them with a more interactive way in the future. Then in the future also, we want to look into other applications such as pack verification, inspection, engaging, and so on and so forth. So those are some of the steps. But what we want to do is we want to make sure that with the electronic work instruction, our management, our operators, supervisors, everyone gets a little bit more familiar with this sort of technology, then we can scale it up. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Now I'll just open it up for any questions you might have.
We have a couple from the app too.
Yeah, Nick Turner, digital twin engineer lead at GHD. Now, as far as the glasses, is it mostly just to free their hands up? Could you essentially do everything on the cell phone, the smartphone that the workers have in their pocket, but then their hands aren't free and they could get hit by a lift? Is that kind of the purpose of lens?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, this is the big advantage of using this sort of handless technology, is to have two of your hands free, right? So let's say our process, which is the casting process, right? In one of the pictures you might have seen, the person actually need to use both the hands. Now, if you're using cell phone or paper-based electronic work instruction, you are actually slowing yourself down. You keep on looking at the paper, then you're actually coming back and doing it. You're looking back and forth, and that kind of slows it down. And the other aspect of this is the interactiveness, right? So if you want to look at the video, you just say video, and you're looking at the video, and while you're watching the video and hearing the narration, you're also working with like a casting of the tank, looking at if it creates any defect or not. So that was very important for us, is to make sure it's also it's hands-free. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I've seen one worker, he has a Wi-Fi kind of
Right. If you want to create a traceability and tracking, if they completed those tasks, that's all where you need Wi-Fi connections. But for the training purposes, for now we are thinking, we have seen that the Wi-Fi connection is not critical. But to track it, how long it took for the person to actually pick up, learn that task, we would need to. That actually gets logged into the app, and that's where Wi-Fi connection would be beneficial.
All right, Jeff's telling me because they got to break the walls down for the next session. But there's a few people maybe who want to talk to you that you can catch them afterwards. There's a few more questions.
Sure.
Round of applause for Arafat.
Hey.
We're taking a 45-minute break, so be back at 4:45 sharp. We've got a panel on ROI, and then we'll end the day with a case study from Raytheon. We got a group from Raytheon.